In the dark corridors of the Tower of London, whispers of torture clung to the damp stone walls like shadows that never faded. Most people had heard of the rack, the infamous device that pulled men apart until their joints snapped. But fewer spoke of its cruel twin, a contraption that crushed the body in upon itself, wringing blood from every pore. It was called the Scavenger's Daughter, and though its name sounded strange, it carried a horror as sharp as the rack itself. Instead of pulling limbs apart, it folded them inward, bending the body into an unnatural submission. Victims emerged broken, not by stretching, but by the suffocating press of their own bones against their flesh. The device was the invention of Sir Leonard Skeffington, a lieutenant of the Tower who served under Henry VIII. His surname twisted over time until the cruel iron bore the name Scavenger. It was designed as a more compact punishment, neat and efficient, able to do in minutes what the rack sometimes took hours to achieve. The frame was forged of strong iron bands, hinged in places, with a locking mechanism that could snap shut. When a prisoner was forced inside, their knees were drawn up, their chest folded, and their head bent forward until the body resembled a grotesque knot. Once locked, the device did not stretch, but crushed. Those unlucky enough to be placed within described the sensation of their chest collapsing inward, the air squeezed from their lungs. Blood surged upward, unable to circulate, bursting from nose, ears, and even the eyes. Some fainted quickly, their minds shutting down under the strain, while others remained conscious, drowning in their own torment. During Henry's reign, the device became a hidden instrument of state power. Its victims were often political prisoners, men accused of treason or heresy, whose confessions were required at any cost. They were dragged to the Tower, past iron gates, where silence pressed as heavily as the stones themselves. One such man was Thomas Abel, a priest loyal to Catherine of Aragon, Henry's first wife. When the king demanded obedience to his marriage with Anne Boleyn, Abel refused, preaching instead that Catherine remained the true queen. For this he was branded a traitor and sent to the Tower. At first Abel withstood the threats of his captors, insisting he would not betray his conscience. He resisted the rack, refusing to cry out, his silence infuriating the interrogators. That was when Skeffington's device was brought forth, gleaming in the torchlight, its shape unfamiliar yet sinister. Abel was forced to his knees, his arms bound tightly behind his back. The guards pulled his legs upward, folding them toward his chest, pressing his head forward until his body could hardly bend further. The iron frame was then clamped around him, squeezing tighter with each turn of the lock. A sickening crack echoed as his ribs compressed against his lungs. His breath came in shallow gasps, his face swelling red as the blood rushed upward with nowhere to escape. Within moments, streams of crimson burst from his nose, trickling down to stain the iron floor. The torment grew worse as the pressure mounted. His ears wept blood, droplets sliding along his jaw. His vision blurred until it felt as though his eyes themselves might burst from their sockets. Yet through it all, he clenched his teeth, refusing to scream, denying his captors the satisfaction. Witnesses later claimed that the device seemed to fold him like parchment, the proud priest reduced to a trembling husk. His body quivered violently as the iron crushed down, each second stripping him of strength. Finally, when his limbs grew limp, the guards released the lock and let him crumple to the ground. Unconscious but alive, Abel was dragged back to his cell. His body bore no open wounds, only the grotesque swelling of his face, the streaks of blood from his ears and eyes, and the fractured bones that made every movement agony. Unlike the rack, which tore men apart visibly, the Scavenger's Daughter left its ruin hidden inside. For the king's men, this made it a favored tool. It was efficient, silent, and terrifying. Prisoners who saw its use needed no further persuasion to confess, even before they felt its iron embrace. The memory of Abel bent like a crushed insect haunted the Tower's corridors. Yet the device was not reserved for priests alone. Nobles, soldiers, and commoners alike could be forced within if their loyalty wavered. It stood as a grim reminder that the crown demanded obedience above all else. The rack stretched men toward death, but the Scavenger's Daughter folded them into submission. As night fell over the Tower, the cries of the tortured echoed faintly through its stones. Guards carried torches past locked cells, their flames reflecting off the iron frame that waited in the shadows. It was not large, nor dramatic, but its cruelty was undeniable. Those who survived its grip spoke of lingering pain that never faded. Bones healed crooked, lungs struggled for breath, and minds shattered under the memory of being compacted into a shape no human body was meant to endure. Some whispered that death was a kinder mercy than release. The Scavenger's daughter became part of England's hidden arsenal of fear, its very name a warning carried through hushed voices. It did not roar with the spectacle of burning or public execution, but it whispered of suffering far more intimate. The device was small enough to be hidden, yet vast in the terror it inspired. Inside the tower, each stone corridor bore silent witness to these ordeals. Prisoners awaited their turn, hearing only the muffled groans of those who had gone before. They could not see the device, but the sight of broken men carried back to their cells spoke louder than any words. Thus began the reign of Skeffington's invention, a machine that crushed both body and spirit. And as England entered one of its most turbulent eras, the Scavenger's daughter stood ready to embrace traitors, heretics and rebels in her iron clasp, ensuring loyalty through pain that words could never capture. The Tower of London did not rest. Its dungeons were alive with whispers, chains clinking, and the footsteps of men who served the king's justice. Among the torches and shadows, the Scavenger's daughter sat in wait, an iron predator silent in its patience. Though Skeffington had invented it during Henry VIII's reign, the device did not vanish when its maker passed. Instead, it lived on, used by later wardens of the tower whenever loyalty faltered. The crown had many enemies, and iron did what persuasion could not. In the years that followed, Elizabeth I inherited a kingdom fraught with conspiracies and rebellion. Catholics plotted to unseat her, foreign powers stirred unrest, and whispers of treason drifted through the court. To preserve her throne, Elizabeth turned to the tower and its instruments. Among the prisoners taken was Thomas Abel, an Irish rebel accused of conspiring against English rule. A young man of defiant spirit, he was thrown into the tower, where the threat of the rack loomed. But when he refused to betray his allies, the guards led him instead to Skeffington's cruel invention. Abel was forced into the frame, his knees driven upward to meet his chest, his arms bent backward until his joints cracked. The iron locked shut with a metallic snap that echoed down the stone chamber. His body folded into itself, the unnatural shape pushing against every rib and sinew. Within moments, blood streamed from his nose and ears, the crushing pressure forcing it outward, as if his body itself were leaking. His face grew swollen, purple with trapped blood, his cries muffled by his own chest pressing into his throat. Witnesses said he looked as though the earth itself had tried to bury him alive. When finally released, Abel was half-conscious, gasping for air as if surfacing from drowning. He collapsed in the dirt, his chest heaving, his limbs trembling. But even as pain racked his body, he whispered words of defiance, vowing he would not betray his comrades. His suffering was not without trace. In his cell, Abel carved words into the stone walls with trembling hands. Thomas Abel, which lieth here, that fain would from hence depart unto Christ. His scrawled testimony remains etched into the tower to this day, a silent reminder of what the iron had done to him. Other prisoners met the same fate, each one folded into grotesque submission. The Scavenger's daughter was compact, making it convenient for secret interrogations, unlike the massive rack that required a wide chamber. It could be set in a corner, ready to embrace the next victim. One nobleman, accused of aiding Mary, Queen of Scots, found himself clasped within the device after weeks of refusing confession. His captors forced his chin down so far into his chest that he felt his neck would snap. Blood trickled steadily from his mouth, pooling on the floor beneath him. The guards who worked the tower grew hardened to the sight, yet even they admitted the device carried a horror unlike others. The rack displayed its torment openly, stretching bodies in a spectacle of breaking joints. But the Scavenger's daughter made men fold like paper, crushing the very life inside without spectacle. Prisoners who survived described the sensation not as pain alone, but suffocation, a drowning within their own flesh. They could not breathe deeply, could not scream fully, could not resist. The body itself became a coffin pressed tight by iron. Elizabeth's court rarely spoke of the device publicly. Unlike executions, which were meant to warn the masses, this instrument served in shadows. It was not a show for the people, but a tool for secrets, a device that broke men quietly before they ever reached the scaffold. And yet, stories leaked. Soldiers spoke in taverns of rebels bent double until blood burst from their eyes. Servants whispered of prisoners carried back to cells limp and pale, their faces grotesquely swollen. The name Scavenger's daughter began to circulate, each retelling twisting its horror larger. For those who entered the tower, the device became a spectre as terrifying as the executioner's axe. The knowledge that such a fate awaited often broke men before iron ever touched them. Many confessed quickly, hoping to avoid the iron embrace. Others, more stubborn, suffered until their bodies betrayed them. The cruelty of the device lay not just in its immediate pain, but in the aftermath. Bones cracked under pressure, leaving men hunched and crippled. Internal injuries lingered for months, making every breath laborious, every step agony. Some prisoners never fully healed, their bodies permanently twisted reminders of the tower's grasp. Still, the Scavenger's daughter was not used in every case. Its application was reserved for those whom the crown most despised, rebels, priests, and traitors whose silence threatened the throne. To be chosen for its embrace was both a punishment and a warning. In the tower's deep cells, the iron frame often sat beside the rack, two twins of torment, one stretching outward, the other crushing inward. Together, they gave interrogators a choice. Would the prisoner be torn apart, or folded until blood wept from his face? The device's silence was its strength. It did not need a screaming audience. It only needed a body and a locked hinge. And in the cold gloom of the tower, iron did its work with relentless efficiency, leaving behind nothing but broken men and bloody stones. Thus, through Elizabeth's reign, the Scavenger's daughter earned its place among England's most dreaded punishments. Its victims remained nameless to most, their cries swallowed by the tower's walls, but the device endured, a compact terror forged in iron, ready for the next soul destined to kneel before it. By the dawn of the 17th century, England had begun to change. Kings shifted, religions clashed, and the Tower of London remained the silent witness to every storm. Its walls remembered what men tried to forget, and within its chambers the Scavenger's daughter still waited. The device was no longer new, yet its iron held the same terrible promise. It was brought out when rebellion flared, when spies were caught, when whispers of Catholic plots reached the ears of the crown. The rack was still famous, but the Scavenger's daughter crept like a shadow, its use quiet and hidden. Under the reign of James I, the fear of Catholic conspiracies reached its height. The infamous gunpowder plot of 1605 had shaken England, and those accused of involvement were hunted down with ferocity. Some were stretched on the rack to reveal accomplices, while others were folded into Skeffington's invention until blood streamed from their faces. Prisoners who had once marched proudly into defiance found themselves reduced to silence in the iron clasp. Men who swore oaths of loyalty to Rome cracked under the weight of their own bodies, pressed inward. Their confessions, extracted in dark chambers, were later paraded at trials, evidence bought with suffering. The Scavenger's daughter never stood in the open air of a scaffold. It never stood before the eyes of a cheering crowd. Instead, it thrived in secrecy, tucked away in narrow rooms where only jailers and victims bore witness. Its silence made it more insidious, a ghost in the tower's arsenal. Those who survived its embrace spoke of lingering nightmares. The sensation of folding into oneself haunted them in sleep, as though the device had never truly released them. They described the taste of iron and blood, the ringing in their ears from vessels bursting, the blur of torchlight as vision dimmed. For many, the greatest terror was not death, but the memory of being alive, while blood poured from the eyes. Such suffering marked them more deeply than the lash or even the axe. Their faces bore no scars, but their haunted eyes betrayed the torment within. Yet as England entered the later 1600s, the world of punishment began to shift. Public executions, hangings, and beheadings drew crowds eager for spectacle, while secret devices like the Scavenger's daughter lost their place. Kings and queens discovered that fear was better cultivated in public, where thousands could see loyalty enforced. The rack itself continued to be used on occasion, its reputation far too loud to silence. But the scavenger's daughter, compact and hidden, became a relic of an older style of interrogation. By the 18th century, its iron lay unused, a curiosity stored among the tower's grim collection. Visitors who toured the tower in later centuries were sometimes shown the strange iron frame, its shape puzzling to the eye. Guides would explain its purpose, how it crushed men until blood seeped from every pore. Some recoiled in horror, while others doubted such a thing could truly exist. Historians debated its use. Some claimed it was more myth than reality, a legend born of fearful whispers. Others pointed to the etched words of Thomas Abel, the stories of priests and rebels, the testimony of wardens, insisting it had been very real indeed. The truth likely lay between. It had not been used as frequently as the rack, nor as publicly as the gallows, but its victims were real enough, and its pain undeniable. Its silence condemned it to obscurity, for history remembers the screams of the crowd more than the gasps of a prisoner in a dark cell. And yet, the device endures in memory. Today, the scavenger's daughter is still displayed within the tower, its iron frame twisted into its cruel design. Tourists peer at it with uneasy fascination, wondering how such a compact thing could wreak so much horror. The irony of its existence lies in its nature. Where the rack tore bodies apart with violence, the scavenger's daughter crushed them with restraint. It was the opposite of expansion, a lesson in compression, a reminder that suffering does not always roar but can whisper in suffocating silence. The victims who bent beneath its embrace remain nameless for the most part. They were rebels, priests, conspirators, and ordinary men caught in tides of loyalty and treason. Their blood seeped into the stones, their cries lost to the centuries, but their suffering echoes in the iron that survives. In the end, the scavenger's daughter was both tool and symbol, a reminder of how power demands obedience, and how even silence can be extracted through force. Its legacy is not written in confessions or royal decrees, but in the dreadful image of a man folded until blood streams from his eyes. The tower still holds its secrets. Beneath the guided tours and polished exhibits, the stones remember. They have heard the stretch of the rack, the hiss of flames, the silence of iron clasping shut. And among them all, the scavenger's daughter remains, England's forgotten rack, a cruel relic of folded flesh and broken silence.